Launch it to Kara. Okay, so now we're recording. I'm Sarah Glakis, one of the founders of the Austin Women's Investing Group. Thank you everyone for joining us today. The Austin Women's Investing Group was founded back in 2011. So we are really, we're really coming up on almost, that it's so crazy to think about, almost coming up on 10 years of doing this. We were created in order to be a place for women to get together and talk about money and finance and investing. So that's what we do. Up until pretty recently, we would meet sometimes in people's living rooms, sometimes at people's conference rooms, at their places of business, and then oftentimes at the Austin Public Library, so that we could have these in-person meetings and really, learn from each other. That's what the Austin Women's Investing Group has really become, is a place for women to learn from each other, the ins and outs of investing. And I've found that every single meeting, there is someone, usually multiple people in the room, that are just really smart about money. And that's how we can all learn how to, up our game all the time as we continue moving through life and trying to make really good financial decisions. Just really quickly, for new members of the group and for existing members of the group, nothing in this group is intended to be individualized investing advice. That has never been a problem, and I never expect it to be a problem. For those of you who are new to the group, though, this is really meant to be a safe educational space where you can ask the questions that you've always wanted the answers to. Kara will leave plenty of room in her presentation for answering questions as they pop up. Again, you'll get a lot of valuable information for the women, sitting next to you virtually on the Zoom call. The not intended to be individualized investing advice is especially important for me. I'm not leading the topic today, but I'm an investment advisor, and so everything that I say will be sharing my opinion and sharing what I think and know about the markets, but none of it's intended to be individual investing advice. So I think that's the basics of what we do at the beginning of every meeting. One of the things I really miss is everyone going around and introducing themselves at the beginning of the meeting. And so if you don't mind doing that in the chat box, that would be just a really nice thing to do, to introduce yourself to the group. So your name, what you do during the day, how you found the group, and what you're hoping to learn. Those are all really interesting things for us to know about you all and for you to know about each other. But without further ado, I am absolutely delighted to introduce Kara Perez. She has led groups of the Austin Women's Investing Group in the past. And I just love having her on because she has created really a completely unique financial education firm at Bravely Go. And she has really just followed her own path in created this really amazing community for women to learn about money and finance and investing. So she's going to be here talking to us about financial resiliency, which is something that's on everybody's minds, right? You know how you get all the emails that start out in these uncertain times, right? It's this whole topic today is, in these uncertain times, here are some things we can be thinking about in terms of our finances to maybe create some stability and some resiliency in our own financial plans. So again, I'm absolutely delighted to have her here. And I am going to let her go ahead and tell you a little bit more about her firm and what she does, and then let her launch into her presentation for us today. So take it away, Kara.
Thank you so much for that very warm welcome, and hello everyone. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right away. I've got some slides that have some information about me, so it won't be a double repeat of stuff. So let me go ahead and switch into presentation mode here on my Canva. Pro tip, if you're not using Canva for all your design needs, we're too far back, oh my gosh, okay. There we go. You should definitely be using Canva because I love it so much. So Yes, I'm going to be speaking today about financial resiliency and financial flexibility, especially in these wild times. 2020 has been a year that I don't think any of us saw coming. I know I certainly didn't. Kudos to you if you were like, I know it's going down in 2020. And so, a little bit about me. So, my name is Perez, and I am based in Austin, Texas. And I always like to start my presentations and everything talking about my financial background because it's not the traditional financial educator's background. And I think that that helps make people feel more welcome because so often when we look at the world of money, especially as women, we can feel very isolated or we can not see ourselves reflected back, which can make us feel like, oh, I'll get to that later, or I don't want to do that. So I graduated college in 2011 with $25,302 in student loan debt and a degree in English. So that's my degree. And it was very much so the aftermath of our last recession. And I could not find a real job, air quotes, to save my life. I worked in the food service industry for the first 3 years out of college because I would just send out application after application and get denied, denied, denied. It was really good for my self esteem. And with my debt hanging over my head and not making very much money as a waitress, money became really a central issue in my life pretty quickly because I wasn't earning very much. I wasn't making very much headway on my debt. I certainly wasn't saving. I definitely wasn't investing. And I realized, oh my gosh, like no one is going to come in on a white horse and save me. I need to figure this out. And this is a lifelong thing. I'm never really going to get to a point where I don't need to be financially educated. And I don't think any of us really get to that point, right? Where it's just like, I don't need to think about this. I mean, maybe if your last name is Bezos, you don't need to think about it. But for the rest of us, we need to be thinking about it. And so, still to this day, I've never had a full time normal job. I now work for myself full time. And I paid off my last $18,000 in student loans in 10 months and then started investing right away in the same year. And so, I can honestly say that learning about money changed my whole life and it brought me to the work that I do today, which, as Sarah so kindly said, is the work at Bravely Go. So, that's the name of my company. And I like to call us a feminist financial education company because we really do talk about money from an intersectional viewpoint. So we're going to talk about things like the wage gap and the racial wealth disparity and how that impacts financial advice. Because if you know you're making 54 cents on the dollar of a white dude, which is what Latinas make, you need different advice than if you are making 85 cents on the dollar to a white dude, right? And if you have kids, if you're married, if you're not, all of that should be taken into account to give you the best type of financial education and tools and advice. And so I work with one-on-one with people as a money coach. I host my own events, both on and offline. Now, obviously, not so much offline right now. And I am now the featured money expert for the show 1A on NPR. So you can catch me on NPR every month, which is really cool. So my grandma knows I have a real job. For a long time, my grandma was like, "What do you do?" And so basically, Bravely exists to help people take control of their money and learn about the systems in the world of money. So we do big and small picture financial education. And so here's where you can find us if you're like, she sounds cool, I'm curious about her. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and then that's our website down there at the bottom. That's me cheesing over there on the left, looking so good. Sometimes I feel like my smile takes up so much of my space and it just makes me a little insecure, but it's how I smile. It is what it is. So let's talk financial flexibility. What is it? I consider financial flexibility to be both a practice and a mindset. So it is something that we can use in the real world. It can be somewhat tangible, and it is also something that is going on up here. And I think, especially in very trying times like 2020, the mindset portion is so important. I wouldn't say more important than the practical side of things, but it's so, so important that we recognize financial flexibility does start up here as well as what we are actually doing with our money. So the mindset side of it is knowing that you can change your money life. We have to believe that before anything will change. If we feel stuck, if we feel stationary, if we feel just kind of, I can't do anything, then we won't do anything because for us, the road has stopped. We've reached the end, baby. Versus if I feel like, okay, I'm not totally sure what it's going to look like, but I know I can change my life, That is financial flexibility because you are open and able to being flexible with your finances, right? Then on the practical side, it's keeping your finances in a changeable state and system. So you probably have, a budget, or you have your bank accounts and your investment accounts, and keeping those in a system of your design that is flexible in the way you want it to be. And we'll talk a little bit more about that throughout this presentation. Now, financial flexibility is for all of us. Your values, your lifestyle, and your circumstances will dictate your level of flexibility. So, like, I don't have children. So that is not something that I'm taking into consideration when I'm thinking about my financial plan. But if you're a parent, that's definitely something you should be taking into consideration. And also, the broader country and economic situation will also play a role, as 2020 is teaching us. So there are things within our control, and then there are things outside of our control. Nobody knows what the stock market is going to do on Tuesday, right? But we do know how much we can contribute to our investments on Tuesday. So that's kind of the macro and micro levels of thinking about financial flexibility. Now, excuse me, sorry, I get so dry when I get chatty, so I'll just be drinking out of my HEB pasta sauce jar this entire time. Now, financial flexibility in the practical sense and in the mindset sense require a plan. So advice and guidance from the pros is wonderful, and you should definitely seek that out. But before you do that, you really need to understand your own finances and goals. That's really going to put you in control, especially in weird times. It's super, super easy to want to have someone else guide you on every move you make. And I certainly have seen an uptick of that in this year with my following and with my clients. People are just like, well, just tell me what to do. But again, your life is different from my life. And so I've devised a plan for my life. But when we're talking about what you want and what you need, if your life is different from mine, which of course everyone's is, we need to develop a financial flexibility plan that moves you towards what you want. Because if I'm moving you towards what I want, that doesn't really work for you, right? So I think as we go into this presentation and as we're thinking about our money in general here in 2020, rather than feel like I need to cling to this guru or this person, I really hope and I really want to encourage everyone to take a minute, sit down, and say, what am I even trying to do? What am I craving? What am I interested in? What am I lacking? These are the kinds of questions that will begin to develop your financial flexibility plan. Now, let's talk about the practical side of it. So, cash. Cash is king, baby. Cash is always king. Cash is always going to be king, in my personal opinion. Now, whether or not we're still having like dollars and cents in 100 years, we'll see. But the concept of cash, of liquid cash, very powerful. So right now we know stock market has been doing all sorts of things this year. In March it was super down. In August the S&P broke its record, I think. August, July, we'll check that at the end. But it definitely broke a record this summer. And that's wild. That's a wild ride for us to be on within a short span. And there's still 4 more months of the year to go. So a lot of the advice that I myself have given from financial experts has been to beef up cash savings. So while you're still employed, while money is still coming in, making sure that you have like a really nice, robust emergency fund, making sure that you've got cash on hand for anything that you might want to do, to buy more stocks, to buy real estate, whatever, in a recession. Now, keeping cash on hand does mean immediate access and total liquidity. You don't have to worry about if you wanted to sell some stocks, that's a process, right? You have to log in, you have to sell it. It takes a couple of days to make the whole thing. So you get the cash, right? Versus if you just go to the bank and you're like, I want my 20 grand right now, they're like, cool, here you go. And you can walk out of there with 20 grand. So that is the ultimate in flexibility. Cash really, really is the ultimate in flexibility. And you can do anything with cash. You can buy a house in cash. You can buy groceries in cash. You can just roll around in it if you want. Like, you can do anything with cash. But cash does also mean a bigger impact from inflation. It means less growth over time. And right now, it means very low interest rates. So any cash that you're keeping that you're not using really on the daily, that's not in your checking account, should probably be kept in a high yield savings account, which is what HYSA stands for. But unfortunately, because the Federal Reserve cut interest rates in March as part of the coronavirus response, there aren't really like traditional high yield savings accounts right now. All of our high yield savings accounts are really in the 0.5 to 1% interest rates. So if you're looking for the magical 3% high yield savings account that you had 2 years ago, that probably doesn't exist. Now, what you might get is an introductory offer from a bank where they're like, we'll put you at 2% for the first 3 months, and then you'll drop down. So a question that I'm getting a lot right now is, where should I put my money? Where should I put my money? And ultimately, what bank you want to keep your money in, where it should go, it's a personal question. You might look at banking from an ethical side of things, you might look at it from a convenience side of things, or you might look at it from an interest rate side of things. So you'll need to do research on that to find what works best for you. But I do want to talk a little bit about inflation with cash right now. So since interest rates are so low, inflation rises roughly 1 to 3% per year. And right now, there's a lot of talk about inflation. A lot of talk about inflation on the old money boards, where people are very concerned about the amount of federal fiscal stimulus. You've probably heard the phrase like, we're pumping money into the economy, which is true. We are definitely doing that because it calls for it. Where that money is going, it's landing in a couple of different places. And what that means for inflation, no one really knows. There's a lot of people out there screaming that this is going to devalue cash. We're about to enter a period of hyperinflation, which may well be true. I'm not here to predict that, but we don't know that's true. So I think it's important that we educate ourselves around inflation, but that we don't get too caught up in the hype machine. Now, cash also means less growth. So if you have a 0.5% interest rate on your savings account, that is going to be less growth than what you can get in the market usually. Obviously, investing in the market comes with its own set of risks. So these are just kind of the things to be thinking about when it comes to cash. I feel like a lot about cash, but I'm getting a lot of questions about it over at Bravely, and so I'm happy to talk about it more during Q&A as well. But this is kind of big picture things to be thinking about. Okay. Now, kind of next up is CDs. So CDs, for anyone who doesn't know, stands for Certificate of Deposit, and they kind of function like high yield savings accounts, but they're less liquid. So when you get a CD, you are essentially locking up your money for a set period of time in exchange for a higher interest rate. So you can get a 3-month CD, a 6-month CD, you can get an 18-month CD, a 24-month CD, which would be 2 years, obviously. So interest rates on CDs generally go up the longer you don't touch the money. So an interest rate on a 24-month CD is going to be higher than on a 3-month CD. So if you have a long-term, kind of a short-term, long-term goal, or a long-term, short-term goal, which would be sometime in the next 1 to 5 years, and you don't want to invest your money actively in the stock market, a CD has traditionally been a really attractive option because you can get a higher interest rate than by just leaving it in your regular old savings account, but it's not at risk the way it might be in the stock market. Now, right now, CDs are subject to the same interest rates or the same forces that move interest rates that our savings accounts are. So you will see a lot of CDs not having super attractive interest rates right now. Like where I keep my high yield savings account, the savings account is the same rate as all the CDs under 18 months. So the question really then becomes, do I not need this money at all for 24 months and I can afford to lock it up to get that higher interest rate? Or do I need the flexibility of the savings account? So that's just, again, personal decision, but it is an option for a place to park your money. It's not the stock market. Next up, we've got money market funds. So money market funds are an account, and their interest rate is based on the current interest rates in the money market. So these usually come with higher minimum balances than a high yield savings account, meaning you need to have more money to put into it right away. A lot of the high yield savings accounts will have smaller minimum deposits or minimum balances, $500, something like that, maybe less, like mine, I think is $10. Whereas a money market account will can have it be much higher. You need a minimum of $1,000. You need a minimum of $750, something. So that could be a barrier for some people. And obviously, there is more fluctuation with the interest rates because it is based on money markets. So that is also a place, though, that you're going to see much less volatility and could be a place to see a much higher interest rate right now than your regular old savings account. So this is kind of like the big picture things where you can put your money that's not the stock market. Now, when it comes to financial flexibility, here are 3 questions that I want you to ask yourself. 1, does my income feel stable? So right now we're in a really interesting economic place, which is individuals in the United States are feeling a lot of the impact of COVID-19. We have crazy high unemployment right now, even though some jobs are coming back, not all jobs are coming back. We have people who are unable to pay rent. I think it was 30% of Americans couldn't pay rent in July. And so a lot of people have lost a lot of money. So the number one thing to be focused on with your finances and to stay financially flexible is income. Where is my money coming from? Does it feel stable? Am I a valued employee at my job? Am I a tenured professor? And like, what is the stability of my income stream? How am I feeling about that? And do I need to take any action on making sure money keeps coming in? So that's the first place to start with your financial flexibility plan. The next place is with your cash savings. And just to clarify, when I say cash savings, I don't mean cash dollars in your hand right now. I'm talking about your bank account. So how much do I have saved in cash? The general personal finance piece of advice is that you need 3 to 6 months in cash in an emergency fund. So that would be if your car breaks down, if your landlord evicts you and you need to put a deposit down somewhere else, the cat gets sick, you've got that to pay the vet right now. So 3 to 6 months is what people have traditionally said. Now, obviously, with COVID and having us seen people be unemployed or furloughed for much longer period of time than expected, some people have changed their advice to 1 year minimum. Now, I just want to go ahead and say that can be a lot. That can be a lot. If you spend $5,000 a month and then you're supposed to have 1 year, all of a sudden you're like, I need 60K in a savings account. Like, that can be a lot. So you can play around with this number according to what's right for you and your family and your needs. But asking yourself, how much do I currently have saved? How much do I want to have saved? And what are my plans for this money? Is this money I want to be doing something with, or is this my emergency fund where I'm just waiting for something to happen and this money will be here? And then finally, what are my 1, 3, and 5 year goals? And then on top of that, how am I willing to change those if needed? So for example, I'll use myself. I've been saving to buy a house here in Austin, Texas for the last 2 years. And now I am wondering if now's the best time to buy a house. It might be, it might not be. I'm not totally sure. I'm not completely clear on how COVID will be impacting the Austin housing market. So therefore, my question becomes, how flexible can I be on this goal? Do I still want to buy a house come hell or high water in the fall like I had planned 2 years ago? Or do I want to continue stashing that cash, build up a little bit more in savings, and then see how I'm feeling come April of next year? How flexible do I want to be on this? So asking yourself those kinds of questions about your and your family's 1, 3, and 5 year goals will help you develop that practical financial flexibility that we've been talking about in terms of we need 3 months in the emergency fund, we need 15 grand in the kids' college fund, et cetera, et cetera. You'll understand where your money needs to be allocated a lot better. Staying hydrated. Okay, questions. If we have a little question break, I need to stop sharing my screen because I can't see the chat. And let me just escape, stop sharing.
And I think probably a small enough group that if you just want to unmute yourself and ask a question, that probably work.
What is this? Start my video. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, chat. So, yeah, just let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns about things that we have already covered.
I have a question.
Great.
This is Sarah, by the way. Maybe you'll get to this in a little bit. I don't know. So if so, then just let me know. But as you're thinking about financial flexibility, how you are seeing people with their priorities. Sorry, I'm feeding back somewhere, but I'm hoping you can hear me. So between saving and accumulating cash, prepaying debt, and continuing to invest in the stock market, the bond market, whatever.
I think what you said was where do people draw the line between accumulating cash and paying down debt?
Okay, how would you, is that feedback better? Oh, good. Okay, great. How would you have people think about how to rank their priorities when it comes to where you're allocating your resources, right? Like, is it definitely step one, accumulate cash, or like how, once you kind of get to that stage, the paying down of the debt, the investing, the next priorities, how are you seeing people work through that now?
Okay, yeah, great question. So I think the best way to allocate your financial priorities is to check in with your emotions and ask yourself, what's stressing me out the most? Because that is a really good guideline. So, for example, if you've got this debt that is stressing you out, say you've got 60 grand in student loans and it just keeps you awake at night, you're like, okay, this is clearly what I want to start paying attention to. And then you ask yourself, does that make the most sense? For example, right now we know that student loans, federal student loans, have been paused through December. So that's actually a lovely gift from the federal government for you to actually focus on your cash savings because you don't have to make those debt payments. So there's the emotional aspect, and then there is the what actually is the smartest thing to do. So I would say check in with your emotions, see where that guides you to, and then kind of do a little bit of research around where you are on that current goal and what tools are available for you. If you're like, I don't want to do that, that seems like a lot of work and emotional introspective that I don't care for right now, that's fine. I would say the most common line of advice from the financial world is to build that cash savings. So I would say at least 4 months living expenses in your emergency fund. And then to begin to focus on maybe continuing to contribute to that until you get to 6 months or what makes you feel comfortable, but also paying down high interest debt. And so that's going to be like your credit cards, anything with something high will depend on you, but I consider anything over 7% to be really high interest rate. From there as well, taking into consideration your age and your assets, if you're 54 and you have not started investing, you need to start investing. No worry, or no matter how much debt you have. If you're 18, you can start investing with one of the apps, so it's a little bit less money month to month. But you also might want to say, I need the cash, I need the debt on. That's a 2-year plan, and then I'm going to start investing at 20. So that's kind of a big picture answer, but I hope that's clear for people. Any other questions I'm not seeing any more in the chat, so I can resume my screen sharing. So let's go back, screen share. Share, perfect. Come back here. Bear with me just a moment. There we go. Okay. So trucking right along. So let's talk about decision making in wild times. So we're living in wild times, baby. Don't we all crave some precedented times? Sick of all these unprecedented times. So again, just like I've kind of been stressing this whole time, personal finance is personal. So you'll need to do what's right for you. But here are kind of 3 steps to build financial flexibility into your decision making. So one, cut out noise. And noise can come in a lot of forms. Noise might be, I need to step away from social media because this is stressing me out and I'm hearing from a million different people, but I just can't take in all that information right now. I need to just be thinking about my life and my finances. Noise might be your uncle who's an accountant who won't stop talking about Tesla and why everyone should be all in on Tesla right now. And like if you're not, that might be noise that you just don't need. Be quiet, uncle. He calls and you're like, deny, deny, deny that call until I figure out what I need. So thinking about noise or distractions in a very big picture sense, and then realizing, okay, here's who I don't need to hear from. Here's where I do need to hear from. What do I need to know more about? What do I need to know less about? The second thing to help with decision making is to be honest about your numbers. A lot of us are, and this is very human, I say this with no judgment, a lot of us are inclined to lie to ourselves about our money. Now, that could be out of a kind of a protective mechanism, that can be a defensive mechanism, that can just be I didn't even realize I was lying to myself because I didn't know enough about what I was doing. But you have to be honest about your numbers. So sit down and run your numbers. Look at everything you've got coming in, what you've got going out, what you've got in assets, and what you've got in debt. And do this without judgment. This is not so that you can feel like a big pile of crap, right? This is so that you can make the best decision moving forward. But we have to do that from a place of honesty. And then the final thing is to build in contingencies. So obviously contingencies are a huge part of financial flexibility, but also your contingencies will be your contingencies, right? So for me, I work for myself, I generate all my own income. So a contingency for me that I've built into my financial plan is, what if I'm out of work for 6 months? What if no one wants to hire me? No one buys anything from me? I don't get asked to speak anywhere. 6 months. What does that mean? For my budget, for my spending, for my investments, what does that mean? And then you can build in other not quite as drastic scenarios, right? Or what if the kids can't go back to school? What does that mean? What if my grandmother buys me a new car? What does that mean? Like obviously don't just play what if forever. I mean, it's kind of a fun game, but be thinking about what you see coming down the pipeline and how that can go right or wrong, and try and build in contingencies for that. So if your grandma mentioned at Christmas last year, like, I think I'd like to buy you a car, and it hasn't manifested yet, maybe you're just like, Grandma, let's check in. Let's just check in with Grandma, And then from there you can know, oh, she was joking, or oh, actually it's on its way. And then you can figure out the plan from there. So those are kind of 3 ways to think about financial decision making in wild times. So here's me looking like a badass. So financial flexibility requires flexibility. I know that sounds really obvious, but the number one thing that I see from people who are struggling with their financial decision making is inflexibility with themselves and their plans. And so that can be a really crucial time to hire a coach, to outsource management of your finances, to just be like, I need help. But really, we have to stop thinking about our finances in this world of black and white, of this is right, this is wrong. Something that I talk about a lot, especially on my social media channels, is forgiving ourselves for past financial decisions. You did the best you could with what you had then. And now maybe you know a little bit more, or your financial situation has changed. So you're going to make new decisions now. But hey, guess what? In 5 years, you might think, oh my God, how could I have done that? It doesn't matter. Right now is what matters, okay? Right now, you have to make the best decision for yourself, for your family, and for your future. And if in the future that turns out to have been a little bit of a left turn, a little bit of a right turn, or spot on, great. It's all the same, kind of, in terms of how we need to approach it with our emotional health. In the same way that when it comes to our decision making, we need to be honest about numbers. When it comes to our decision making, we also need to know that it's not just our money that needs to be flexible, it's us. It's our emotional health, it's our mental health, it's our relationship to money and to the people in our financial lives that need to be flexible as well. So I feel really strongly about that. Happy to answer any questions. But I really like to say there are no dumb questions when it comes to money. And I really hope that people understand there are probably like dumb decisions. I guess if you like won the lottery and you spent every single penny on like balloons, that I think we can all agree is kind of like a dumb decision. But pretty much everything else. It's not a dumb decision. It's a decision that you made at a time that felt right, that seemed right. And now that that time has passed, we've moved on, we've gotten new tools, we've gotten new education, we can make new decisions. Okay, so Sarah very kindly reminded me when we were in our little private chat to share any upcoming Bravely events. So we've got a negotiation workshop. These are both virtual on 9/14, and so that's going to be how to negotiate, yes, even in COVID times. And then on the 21st, we've got an investing 101 workshop, how to not die broke. So if you're like, that sounds good to me, both of these can be found on Eventbrite. We have a Bravely page on Eventbrite. You can find this on our Instagram at the link in bio. They're on our website. So yeah. And then once again, here is where you can find us on the internet. So it's at We Bravely Go on Instagram and Facebook. And then actually on Twitter, it's at Bravely Go, not We Bravely Go. I couldn't get the We Bravely Go handle, so that's annoying. So, okay, once again, I'm going to pop out of the screen share. I'll come back to the group, and I'm back. So, questions, topics we wanted to continue dissecting. I almost said digesting, sort of similar. I'm looking at the, so Kara, for people with money in the stock market, do you have tips for helping them deal with the short-term uncertainty volatility? Yes. So first and foremost, don't check your accounts every single day. Just don't do it. There's no need to do that. All it's going to do is stress you out. It's going to give you wrinkles you don't need. Second of all, remember this. We invest for decades, not for days. That's what I tell all of the people in my life. Very, very few, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but very, very few of us are going to invest on Monday, become a millionaire by Thursday, and cash out on Friday. So it's most important to remember to align your investing up with your goals. And so if you know, so I'm investing in my retirement account, I'm not going to need that money for 30 years. It doesn't really matter what happens next week, right? It doesn't really matter what happens in December, because you're not going to need that money for 30 years. So thinking about it with this long-term mentality rather than focusing on the short term and getting so stressed out or concerned or even excited, take a deep breath. Remind yourself when you're going to use that money, and then don't look at it as often as you need to, or as often as you are. Okay, so Carmen says something. Carmen, I don't see a question from you. I see I moved money to a money market fund, and you're happy with the results, but I don't see a question. Okay, I got another question.
Probably unmute yourself too.
Yes, if you want to just ask verbally, that's also fine. I did get a question in the chat that says, you mentioned paying off high interest debt. Do you recommend a consolidation loan to do this? What is generally required to qualify for such a loan? So this is something that I can't answer without knowing way more about your finances, to be totally honest. This is one of those things where a consolidation loan can be a really powerful tool to pay off debt, but it can also get you in way more trouble than you're already in. It's totally going to depend on who you get the loan from, what the interest rate is on the loan, what the lifeline is on the loan, and your income, and like how able you are to meet the loan terms. If you're already struggling to meet your current debt terms, you might still struggle to meet the consolidated loan terms. Consolidation generally takes you from, say you're paying $500 a month on 3 different loans. It generally consolidates it into one loan and lowers your monthly payment, but it extends the life of the loan so you can pay more on interest over time. So that might not be the best financial decision. I don't know. So I have no beef with consolidation loans, but it's not something that I would say you should just like is blanket good. So it would really depend on your financial situation. Carmen, I'm trying to decide if moving savings to money market. So again, I'm not clear on what you're asking me, Carmen. I gotta be honest. I'm just not sure what you want to do. Are you asking, should I move my savings to a money market account? Again, I don't know because I don't know your personal finances. It could be a good idea because you could be getting a higher interest rate in the money market. So I would check that out, especially like at your brokerage. Are you considering using the money market there? Do you want to open a new account at a different brokerage? I would do my brokerage research. And then I would also ask myself, is this my emergency fund? Is this something I'm going to need? Or is this like, I don't really need this money in the next couple of years? Then that could be a really smart decision, I think, to move it, but I'm not sure.
Sorry.
Sorry.
This is Carmen.
Hmm.
I had said earlier, I moved from a money market to a tax-exempt mutual bond fund that I was very happy with over what I was getting on the prime money market. And this was money I was going to use to buy a home with. Now I'm just trying to decide if I want to buy even. And I'm happy with the results with the tax-exempt bond fund. And I have money sitting in savings with my traditional bank account. And I'm like, that money's just sitting there too, but that's my emergency money, that maybe I should just go ahead and put that in the money market instead of my regular bank savings account, and that I can withdraw as I need it, right? Whoop.
Oh, okay. Now you can hear me. I would definitely take it out of your regular bank savings account because that's probably getting you 0.01% interest rate. Like that's the interest rate at Wells Fargo and Bank of America right now, and I'm sure Chase, the big guns out there. So even moving that to whether it's a high yield savings account that's getting 0.80%, that's a significant win already, or moving it into the money market fund. So yeah, I would just check, log in to your brokerage and just see what the money market fund is looking like, do your research. But yeah, I would definitely take that cash out of where it currently is and put it in either the money market or a high yield savings account. So we're seeing, and then Amy Lynn budgeting app. So I'm seeing some answers on that. I can co-sign those apps as well. And then, yeah, Excel is also what I can can recommend. And then banks do also have money market accounts. I just think of them as brokerages because that's where I would put my money market account. But you can get that at a bank as well. Anyone else can feel free to hop on the voice as well if they want. The voice ask, the voice call. I don't know.
Hi, this is Amy.
Hi.
Jump in with a question. So I totally agree and hear what you're saying about, get your emergency fund in place and then start trying to work on reducing any high interest debt that you have. And I have heard of people using the trick of transferring their balances to a low interest rate, like getting a new credit card and kind of playing that game as far as like trying to pay that off. Do you recommend that, or is that not really work anymore, or is it just dangerous because then all of a sudden you have, instead of just 2 credit cards, you end up having 4 or 5? I'm just curious to hear if anyone's played that game or tried that trick. Thanks.
Yeah. So first, I want to encourage you to remove the language of play the game or try that trick from your financial vocabulary, simply because this reinforces a mindset that money is something that is like a challenge to be conquered, whereas money is a tool that you're already using. That's the fact of the matter. Whether you have debt, whether you don't, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, money is a tool we're all using. And if we see it as kind of like a maze that we need to fight our way through, that can create like a weird relationship to money. The second thing I would say is, yeah, it can be a very useful tool. Absolutely. It's something that millions of people are taking advantage of every day. They're using it, it works for them. It's totally going to depend. I feel like everything I say is it's totally going to depend, but it is. What's your credit score? How many lines of credit do you already have open? Are you looking to improve your credit score? Are you going to get mad if you open a new credit card and your credit score goes down by 20 points because you're trying to get approved for a new apartment in the next 2 months? It's definitely something you can do if it's right for you. Again, I would need to see your finances to know that, but I think that like look into it certainly and see what you qualify for in terms of 0% interest credit cards, what the transfer fee would be, and if that's something you feel comfortable doing.
Hey, Kara, can I jump in on that? I want to echo what you just said, Kara, and I think maybe I actually just cut you off. But I love what you just said about credit being a tool. I mean, I think that that is something that, you kind of come into investing finance, like with this idea that credit is bad. And what I often see, and I kind of want, people to think through is that like having people will often say like, well, if I apply for that home equity line of credit, which would actually make me more stable in the short term, if I applied for that home equity line of credit, is it going to impact my credit score? And what I kind of always come back with is like, that's what your credit score is for. So you have a good credit score so that you can obtain credit on very cheap terms, and then you can potentially use that for investing, or just like in the case of a line of credit, have it available in case of an emergency. But it's less of thinking like your credit score is like something you put in a trophy case, and more of like, hey, this is valuable. Like a high credit score is valuable when you turn it into awesome credit, right? Like a great mortgage rate or a great line of credit rate or something like that, that they are tools. They're not the ends. They're the means. They're not the ends. So I just wanted to echo that because I thought that was really, really smart.
Yeah, totally. I love that. Yeah, and the reason I think the other thing why I wanted to say like remove that language from your vocabulary about how Amy Lynn was talking about money is because if we think of it as like a challenge, right, or as like a weird thing, we tend to be suspicious of these tools like our credit score or like lines of credit in general. And then we might miss out on using them to our advantage. And so you have to remember, like, all of these things exist because they do help people. Now, a lot of people get into trouble with them, and so they're not for everyone. And of course, there are like predatory financial lenders and financial advisors out there, like there are bad eggs everywhere. But that doesn't necessarily make the tool bad. It's how we implement the tool that is really the thing to be thinking of. So, like for me, if I had $5,000 in credit card debt, a balance transfer probably wouldn't make sense because I would be able to pay that off in full. But if I wasn't, a balance transfer is a great tool to take advantage of if it makes sense for you. So just want to really hammer that point home. Great. So maybe there's time for one more question if anyone has anything. Also, no pressure.
I have a question. Can you hear me? Okay. My question is, my husband and I are blessed that we've kind of achieved the goals that we have wanted to over the last 1, 2, 3, or 5 years. So we're struggling with what does the next 1, 3, or 5 years look like. Do you have any suggestions related to that? Do you suggest having different categories, like small goals might be a vacation versus a big goal might be something like that? So I was just curious to see if you have any recommendations when you're coming up with your goals. And does that make sense?
I think so. I think the best way to think about goal setting is to start with the furthest destination in mind and then think back, what do I need to get there? And so that I always think of like, who do I want to be when I'm 75? I want to be someone who speaks Spanish, who has traveled a bunch, who has a home in a beautiful mountain lake somewhere, and okay, knowing just those 3 things about myself, reverse engineer that. I need to pay for Spanish lessons, right? I need to figure out where I want to go traveling and when that makes sense. Do I want to take a year off and travel? Am I trying to do this in 1 week spurts? So I think thinking about that for your own life, we've achieved our goal. So obviously you and your husband are good at getting things done. So feeling free to dream really big and then kind of reverse engineering a timeline around that. Oh, we want to have 5 kids by next year. Can't do that. Let me like, we want to have kids by this time, or we want to have a paid off house by this time, or we want to have another house by this time. And then you'll be able to tie finances to that. And if you're having trouble dreaming, I think that you should just go like so big. Like what if you had Oprah's money? Like what would you do if you were Oprah? This is a game I play all the time. And then that will show you, I think, some like secret things in your heart. And you might be like, oh, I'm really interested in this, which I hadn't really been paying attention to. And now I want to go learn more about how I can get involved in that in the next year.
And that was very helpful. Thank you very much. That gave me lots of suggestions to go dreaming with.
Great. Well, I think that's our time. Are we at our time? I think we're supposed to be an hour, Sarah.
No, we actually have 2 hours set aside. We don't need the whole 2 hours, right? And certainly I'm willing to stay afterwards and ask, and stick around and answer any questions that pop up, as I think, unless that Kara probably will too. Do you have time for one more question? There's one in the comment box about how did you pay off your student?
Yeah, so that is in several blog posts on my website, so you can go read those. But generally, like my debt payoff story is not normal. I want to just start with that. It is very abnormal, wherein I was a freak about debt payoff. I mean, I was a freak about it. I built my entire life around my debt payoff because so I graduated a little over 25, but by the time I got serious about paying it off, it was down to about 19,000, 18,000. And I was like, this is just small enough that if I make this my whole life, I can accomplish this quickly, which is not usually the case for a lot of people. I was also 26, 27. I was living with roommates. I had a bunch of part-time jobs. But basically, it boiled down to increasing my income and increasing my debt payments. And increasing my income, not very much. You don't have to be making $100,000. I made $18,000 in 2014, and then I made $32,000 in 2015, and that was the year I became debt-free. And both of those numbers are before tax. Whew. So, but like that was what I did. I paid off debt. So it's like kind of glamorous when you're like, oh, 18K in 10 months. And then it's very unglamorous when I'm like, I didn't go out to eat. I didn't go on vacation. I put every single penny I had towards debt. So that's the truth of that.
I have one more question for you, Kara. Do you think that people should jump out of the stock market in preparation for the upcoming elections?
I was just having this conversation this morning. I mean, no one knows what will happen. I really want to stress that. No one knows what will happen with the election and with the stock market. So no, I don't think you should get out of the stock market. I'm not liquidating anything myself. I'm like, the stock market will still exist on November 3rd, right? I don't know what it'll look like exactly. It'll still exist. I do think we'll see some volatility this fall. And volatility is nothing to be afraid of. Again, I remind myself I'm investing for decades, not for days. I am not using any money in my investment accounts to live my life right now. Now, if you are, slightly different, obviously. but I think stay in the market. Even if it crashes, it's going to come back. It always has. If it skyrockets, you're going to be glad you're in the market, right? So stay steady would be my advice.
Does anyone else have anything? Now that I've opened up the topic to anything financial or investing related that Kara will wade into, then it really kind of opens up the universe of possibilities. So, yeah, ask her anything. I've got her on mute so she can't even not to do that.
Yeah, I see Lorena has a question. How has feminism shaped how you look at investing? That's a great question. I've spent hours of my life developing this theory of mine. So I call myself a financial feminist, and that to me means a lot of things. But when it comes to investing, I think every woman should be investing. I think every non-man should be investing. Is a better way of putting it. I think it's so important, especially knowing like we're up against the wage gap, we're up against discrimination, and the wage gap varies depending on your race, depending on your age, depending on your field. So when we know we're being underpaid, and when we know studies show women are great investors, like once we get involved, we're good at investing. Why wouldn't you invest? And I think for me, it ties into a couple of things. Like, I think all women need to have their own money in some way, shape, or form. You know, doesn't mean you need to be 100% separate from your spouse, but I think you need to have your own money. I think women need to understand how money works as a tool, and investing is a huge part of long-term money management and long-term wealth growth. And so understanding that on your own, so you don't have to just, if someone asks you an investing question, you're like, well, my husband handles that, or like, oh, my money manager handles that. No, you should understand the language of investing. And I also see it as such a gift. Like, I was just speaking about this on my Instagram, but I'm very blessed. I have both my grandmothers, both 92 years old, and they did not have access to credit. Like, they couldn't get their own credit card, they couldn't get their own home equity line of credit, whatever, until their mid 40s. Their lives, their financial lives, and their lives were dictated by their husbands. And I love my grandparents. My grandfathers were great to me, but like, they were products of their time. And I have an opportunity that my grandmothers quite literally never had. And so I take that very seriously in terms of how I manage my money and how I see myself as kind of like, for the next generation, like I'm knocking down doors for the next generation of women. And so that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that my feminism has informed my investing decisions, and I'm an aggressive investor. Okay, we have another question. We are paying for my daughter's college undergrad degree, but I warned her we're not paying for grad school. How do you recommend she prepare for this reality? First of all, you sound like my mom. Yeah, not that my mom didn't pay for my undergrad degree, but she made it very clear that she wouldn't do that. And that was good to know. So first and foremost, ask her if she really needs to go to grad school. I don't think that grad school is the requirement that a lot of people think it is. Obviously, if she has hopes and dreams of going into a specialized field, that's a different thing. But look around, man, there is a lot of money, especially for women in a lot of programs. So she should be able to wrangle up a bunch of scholarships, maybe some grants, if she's willing to put in the time and do the application process. My boyfriend is currently in grad school, and I literally told him, I was like, we're not taking out any student loans. You're not taking out any student loans for grad school. And I did some research, he did some research. We found a bunch of scholarship programs. He applies at the beginning of every semester, and he's gotten a nice chunk of change for grad school. So I would start there. I would also think you have to think about living cost with grad school. She's obviously going to need an apartment. She's going to need, transportation. And so coming up with any kind of ballpark figure for what graduate school life looks like, and then just thinking how she can prepare for that now. Does she have a job now? Is she saving now? Those kinds of things. The more you can do in advance, the easier the future will be. Donna asks, do you self-direct your funds? I do. Oh, here's a question. And Sarah, you also might want to chime in on this. A family member recently tried to push some other family members into stock splits, which I think is similar to the fractional ownership model. Do you have any thoughts on this? Your family member was probably jazzed about Tesla and Apple. That was a really big thing last week. I think it happened on Wednesday or Monday. I can't even remember. Who knows? So, yeah, stock splits. I think it goes back to, rather than trying to time the market, it goes back to time in the market, right? And knowing what you're trying to do with your investments and how much you have to invest and what you want to invest in. So rather, for me personally, like I didn't buy any Tesla, even though I think it's probably a good investment, but I was like, I don't need it. It doesn't work for my plan, doesn't work for my budget right now. So I think if someone's really excited about something, great, they can be excited for you. It comes back to what you're trying to do. Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do have some thoughts on stock splits. Someone, Shanice, did you ask this question a couple weeks ago? Someone else asked about stock splits, and it was related to Apple and Tesla. So if this is the same thing that I said 2 weeks ago, it's because it's still true. So a stock split is it's mathematically equal. So the idea is that you start out owning one share of Tesla at $2,000 per share. So you own $2,000 worth of Tesla. They split 5 for 1. That means for every 1 share of Tesla, they split your 1 share into 5 shares at $400 a piece. Is my math right there? Is that right? Yeah, 5 shares at $400. So 1 times 2,000 equals 2,000. 400 times 5 equals 2,000. So they are mathematically equivalent. There's no inherent, this is better than that, except for a few things. One, every single person I've ever asked in any of my classes or in this group ever has said they would rather have 5 shares at $400 a piece. Even though, like, you can see that they're mathematically equivalent, right? And so there's like a behavioral signal that people get caught up in, like probably the family member. It sounds better to have 5 shares at $400 than to have 1 at $2,000, but they are mathematically equivalent. So that's the first thing that I've like had many years of coming to this realization that nobody cares that they're mathematically equivalent, that everybody gets caught up in the fact that it's a share split. So I'm conceding that point. But they're mathematically equivalent. The second thing for long-term investors and investors in the stock market in general, when you own a share of stock, you own a piece of a company. It is a gazillion times more important to want to own a company than to want to own a stock. Like the company Tesla, like people generally know how Tesla works, right? Like they generally have a general idea. Whether or not you buy shares of Tesla stock should have everything to do with whether you think that company is going to grow and make money in the future, not whether it splits or reverse splits or, what the splits don't matter. The splits aren't what's driving the profitability of the company. So whenever you're in the stock market, if you're a long-term investor, which is really, I think, what most of this group is interested in, is investing for the long term, you buy a stock because you want to own a company, not because there's some sort of short-term event that has happened, especially something like a stock split. This might make me like old-fashioned, which it probably does, but I think it's true. And I think it's the way you make money over the long run. So if you want to own Tesla, I mean, Tesla's stock price last week was totally bananas. It went up as people bought the stock based on the stock split news, and it fell hard the last 2 days of the week as people kind of realized that the company was not any different at the beginning of the week than it was at the end of the week. So those are kind of differences between speculating, where you can get burned and lose a lot of money real fast in the short term, and being a long-term investor where you're buying shares of companies so that you can ride along with them for the long run as they get bigger. That was a long answer. Sorry, y'all, kind of went on a stock split tangent, but it's a really, really good question. And I'd be happy to hear from anyone else who has thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. I think something that I spend an inordinate amount of time on is thinking about how people view the stock market. And when one company makes enough noise, everyone starts paying attention. So Tesla's been making a lot of noise for a while, and then it kind of came to a crescendo when the stock split happened. So even though people don't know very much about Tesla as a company, certainly millions of people who did not know how much Tesla cost on August 29th knew how much Tesla cost on August 30th or whenever the split happened, because it just got so much attention. But I think when it comes to your investing strategy, you know, like the buy low, sell high will never do you wrong. Buying high, not necessarily a bad thing, not necessarily a good thing. And I think it's so important to not get distracted by everyone else's attention in the stock market, but to stay focused on your attention in the stock market. So, oh my God, Leora, I wish someone made more noise about Chipotle. Yeah. So, okay, I think we had one other question up here. I'm scrolling back up. Okay, we got. Someone asked, when you invest, do you select particular stocks or more of the mutual funds? How do you decide your investment strategy? So, you know, again, everyone's investment strategy is different. For me, I don't do individual stock selections. So I am self-directed, so I make all my own investment decisions, and I just don't have the interest, the patience, or frankly, the stomach, I think, to do individual stock picking. So I only buy funds. And then when it comes down to funds, you should really be considering the fees that you're paying. You should be considering possibly the ethics of the fund that you're interested in. And you should be considering it from a diversification point of view. Like if this is a S&P index fund, if this is a healthcare fund, if this is a tech fund, you know, like what are you buying into? You should understand what you're buying into. So, okay, now I'm not seeing any other questions, but we're back to talking about Tesla, which I enjoy. I love talking smack about Tesla, so. Ashley asks, any good resources you can recommend regarding asset allocation? In terms of learning what it is or how to make asset allocation decisions? If you could say more, Ashley, that would be maybe helpful. Examples of it. I think if you just Google asset allocation, you'll get quite a bit of information on that. There are a million articles about that out there. You can also ask people how they allocate their assets.
I'll jump in on this one too, Kara. Sorry. And I think I got this from someone in the group, or we've talked about this in the group before, that like a pretty good starting place for figuring out like what your percentages are, right? Like stocks versus bonds versus international stocks, whatever, the different asset classes. You can start with a target date fund. So if I'm 41, right? So if my Vanguard target date fund is the Vanguard target date 2040 fund, I could go to Vanguard, look at the breakdown of their target date fund and see what they recommend someone, it's really just only of my age, that someone of my age should be invested in, right? It's something like 50% US stocks, 20% international stocks, 10% US bonds, or 10% international bonds, or whatever it is, right? That it's at least a starting place, I think, for how you can think about how to split up your own portfolio. So I think that's worked for some people in the past. It's you can just go get someone else's opinion as to where you should be starting based on your age, and then you can tweak it from there depending on, whether it's aggressive enough or not aggressive enough, and you can change the percentages from that starting point.
Cool. Sorry, y'all. I thought the whole meeting was an hour. I would have prepared more. So I didn't mean to do this. Okay. When I was younger, I had an uncle that tried hard to convince me to buy his annuities. I never hear anyone talk about these much. Are they a good investment ever? I dislike annuities. I think in large part they're far too expensive and far too inflexible for most people. I think especially if you're younger. That said, nothing is ever totally good or bad. So, but I could never, I cannot see myself in having a coaching client or being in conversation with someone where I'm like, an annuity makes a lot of sense for you. That's my opinion on annuities.
Hi, I think Amy had a question. Scroll up a little bit.
Sorry.
Good books on the podcast. Oh, you go.
Okay. Can I'm sorry, whoever's asking the question, can you unmute yourself and start again?
I can read it for her. Do you have any books or podcasts that you'd recommend for a newbie? Somebody's trying to get a handle on money and start investing?
I am going to drop the link to this book that I love. I'm just trying to find it. Where it's called Broke Millennial Takes on Investing. And it is great. It's a really easy read, and it will tell you everything you ever wanted to know about beginner investing. I think something to just consider with any like book or website or Instagram account, like wherever you're going to get your investing knowledge, is that you're not going to get individualized advice. And I only say that sounds a little demeaning, and I'm so sorry, but it's just that so many people expect, they confuse, so I misspelled millennial. They confuse like learning with advice. So, but I love this book. It's super, super good. And then there's another book that I can also recommend. It is much drier. It's called The Boglehead's Guide to Investing. So if you can stay awake for this one, it's really, really informative, and it's good. It is just a little bit dry. It's just a little dry. So I'll also drop that link. And so I'm also linking to bookshop.org, which buys books from local independent bookstores. So I like them. Okay, so we've got a lot more conversation here. So, okay. Let's see. Oh, some people are leaving. Okay, thank you all so much for coming. Okay, so Jimmy says, I'm looking to buy a car, and part of me wants to put down a large payment, but another part of me wants to use other people's money like a loan and keep my money and do something else with it. Any thoughts? I'm pretty debt averse. I think if you can qualify for like a 0% car loan, you should take advantage of that. You know, that's what I would do. When we talk about using credit as a tool, like that's a tool. It doesn't get better than that. If you're super debt averse, then just have to sit with like how much debt you need to, are you taking on a car loan of $10,000 or is it a loan of $20,000, and how will that help you sleep at night? But I think, especially with cars, especially now, you should be able to get a pretty good deal. And if you can get, a 1% or 0% interest rate, like I would use that other people's money for sure. Those are my thoughts. So, okay. I'm sorry, it keeps like moving me. I keep trying to scroll up, they come in and it like moves my spot. So I see some discussion on annuity. So Sarah has been responding to that. Millionaire Teacher. I haven't read Millionaire Teacher, but I've heard good things by that book as well. Any suggestions on apps for young kids to learn about money? How young? Like 6. I think there's one, oh gosh. Oh, I'm completely blanking on the name, but it helps you build, it gets the kid involved on building like a household budget. So it's very visual. And it'll be like, we're in the grocery store. And I cannot remember, but if you Google like kid household budget game, hopefully it'll come up. It's new, it's a newer app, but there's also a podcast called Millionaire Bazillionaire. It's got a funny name, and it's from Marketplace, and it's specifically at targeting kids and their parents around money, and so that's a good one. It's obviously a podcast, not an app, but right there for them. Lots of good chat about cars in this. I love it. Yeah, kids as young as 10. I would definitely go with that podcast. I think that podcast is really cool. I just listened to it myself the other day. I don't know of any other like apps or games specifically targeting. Okay, so I see Kristen here. So Kristen, I typically drive my cars into the ground. I'm considering, my current car is 60% paid off. I'm considering refinancing it because of the rates, but I'm also interested in purchasing a new used car, leaning towards keeping the existing car, refinancing, and driving until it misbehaves consistently. Thoughts? This is an interesting one. I think you should come at this from like, how much driving am I doing? And has that changed because of COVID? And do I see that changing in the future? Like, was I not commuting in April, May, June, July, but I'm going to be commuting again this fall? Like how much do I need my car? And interest rates are not going to be going up anytime soon. So Jerome Powell, who is the chair of the Federal Reserve, said just recently, like 1 or 2 weeks ago, he's like, we will keep interest rates low. Basically come hell or high water. So you will be able to get a car at a low interest rate well into 2021, very likely well into 2022. So that could mean you have more time to build savings, to get a car maybe more outright in cash. It could mean that you want to buy that newer car at a lower rate, use other people's money. I like keeping cars until they are until they're constantly misbehaving. I like the way you said that. Cars are depreciating assets, and you're never going to get money out of your car ever again. You're just going to put money into it. So I think keep what you got until you can't anymore, and then I still think you'll be able to get a nice deal, especially if your credit score goes up. Wow, look at this 8-year-old saving $300. Very cool.
I do have to tell you guys that that's my 8-year-old that saved $300, and she did want to blow it all a couple months ago on this white Mercedes SUV, like one of those little driving cars that kids have. She's like, Mom, it's $299. I can totally cover it. And that I did the veto on that one. I vetoed that. So that's all. Sorry. Back to regularly scheduled programming.
I love that. That's something I would have got as a kid. That sounds super fun. Yeah, Kate with the good point. She is going to grow. Right. Does anyone here, I'm seeing a lot of chat around cars, so does anyone here have a car that they love, that they feel really good about what they purchased, and want to just give recommendations to the folks out here looking for new cars? I myself am in the market for a new car, so I have a little bit of a selfish intent here. Honda Civic 2012. I've heard a lot of good things about the Civic. Okay, we got a Prius, Ford Focus. So, yeah. The Ford Focus does not love the software. Okay, good to know. Mazda, Toyota. Okay, I'm seeing a lot. I asked this the other day on my Instagram too, and I got a lot of Honda, Toyota, and Mazda recommendations. So I'm seeing a lot of those same names here. Whoa, 320,000 miles? Oh my God. Wow. I'm like, I need to write that down. That Nissan. Ooh, lawsuits on the new Nissan. Wah, wah. Cool. Well, thank you all so much for that. I appreciate those recommendations. Caitlin asks, can you refinance car loans to take advantage of lower rates? Yes. I don't know anything about that process, but you can.
Sorry, I'll jump in here for a second. Caitlin, a lot of times credit unions have really good car refi rates. And I don't know why. Kirsten, you know why, right? You work with community bank. Can you chime in as to that seems to be the place?
I sure can. Yeah, so credit unions are co-ops. You know, everybody is a member. And so they are able to offer lower rates because they put back in, they don't take profits. And they just became known for doing great loans, particularly car loans. And so the industry favors them, and it continues to do so. My credit union in town just offered, I don't know, 1.125% or something, which is why I was like stroking my beard about that. And I have a great rate. I think I have like, I don't know, 3 or 3.75, but yeah, credit unions are a great way to go.
Yeah. So Caitlin asks, would they lower it? Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you have to refinance, but yes. Now is the time. When it comes to rates, rates will never be lower, baby. So I guess I don't technically know that. I don't like to promise things, but rates are very low across the board.
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in and piggyback off that, Kara, because you already did mention this. And I think it is important, like for making these decisions, especially in the short term. The Federal Reserve has said they're going to keep interest rates low for a long time. So Kara already said that. The Federal Reserve is very clear about that. So, you know, when you're thinking about like the savings rates and the money market funds and even bond yields, I mean, we're going back in time like it's 2012 again, right? So we're going to have to get used to, again, having really super low interest rates, which is not good for savers, but is very good for borrowers. So if you can use that to your advantage, just like, I think the Jerome Powell said 2025 or something. Well, it's really far away. So that like means like refinancing everything, being smart about your use of credit, using it where it makes sense. And also just like settling into that being the investing environment that we're in, and like the personal finance environment that we're in. That's all.
Okay, so Leora asks, with interest rates low, what about putting money ready to jump into market in your investment account when volatile leads to drop instead of storing in HSA? What about putting money ready to jump into the market in your investment account? I feel silly, but I'm not sure I understand this question. Yes. I think your emergency fund should be in a high yield savings account. What about putting money? Is this money, you mean like I'm ready to invest, I've just been waiting? I would go ahead and invest that money. If folks had cash stored in a brokerage account prior to March, so well, the market was breaking highs in the beginning of the year. So I think in January the market broke records, and then I think it also broke records in February as well. So we have to remember about the stock market. It was doing great. We were in the bull market for 9+ years, almost 10 years. Before COVID. I know it's hard to remember before COVID, like the market was doing great. People were very bullish. And so now, okay, let's see. We don't know, but we know. I don't know the reasoning behind Sarah's question about liquefying ahead of the election, but the market, I mean, the market is consistently volatile, period. There's never been a time in the market where it hasn't been moving. The market moves, that's what it does. And a million things can move the market, and obviously this year has been a wild year. But actually, if you look at what the market has done since March, yes, we were in a bit of a roller coaster for a while, but we have been seeing pretty consistent upticks. I mean, obviously it's moving. That's what it does. It moves. So if you're concerned about like, should I pull my money out? Oh, okay, so here it is. So if your emergency fund is maxed, should I leave extra cash in my investment account, or should I put extra money and save it? So, okay, I think I understand what you're saying now. Like, the market is crazy volatile to you, and you're wondering, does it make sense to leave the money in there that you've got, or should you take it out? And probably also you're wondering, should I continue to contribute to it? Or should I be putting that money someplace less volatile, like a high yield savings account? And so it's a very personal decision. I will say, like, I'm not taking any money out of the market, but I'm 32 and I am not using that money. I don't really care if all my money disappears tomorrow. That's not true. I would care a lot if all my money disappeared tomorrow, but I have every faith that it would come back. And so I'm not touching it. But if you are having a really difficult time with the volatility of the markets, and if you are close to needing the money in the markets to fund your life, which is ultimately the goal, then I can totally understand wanting to make things less volatile. So that might be shifting your asset allocation. You know, you don't necessarily need to take money out, but maybe you want to start buying more bonds as opposed to stocks or funds. I think you can pull some money out, but I would be really, you know, not hesitant exactly. I would just be really careful. I would make sure that I knew exactly what I was doing with that money. If I'm just pulling money out to sit on it, why? Is that because I believe we're about to descend into a civil war and like I need this money? Or is that because I'm just fearful and I want to do something? You know, like you have to really override your emotions when it comes to the market and think with as cool a head as possible. And I'm sure Sarah has some more things to say about this.
And Lyra, just the reason I posed the question is that is one of the main questions that I'm getting from people these days. As you know, most of my job is stock market related. So it, you know, and I think especially as the dollar amounts in the accounts get larger and people get closer and closer to when they do need the money, that's where the questions come from. You know, I think at least on my side, I had a lot of clients who made it through March 2020 as best they could, right? They hung in there and they gutted through it just like they should. And I'm starting to wonder whether there are you know, some people who just can't do it again, right? Where it's just like, it's too much. You know, 2020 has been a tough year. And, you know, Kara already talked about, and we talk about, you know, all the time, like the behavioral and the emotional component of investing. Right. And so, you know, when I ask Kara, like, you know, should people jump out of the market? I think people are starting to either assume they can or assume they should be predicting which way the market is going to go in the short term. And to some people, it seems very obvious that the market will crash before the end of the year. So why don't we get out now, buy back in then? That's how we make money. That's not my philosophy, by the way. You know, I'm with Kara too, that for really anyone who has money in the stock market, it's supposed to be long-term money, right? That if you need money to be safe in the short term, then it should already be in bonds and cash. And so I'm not a proponent of this, but it is a question I get more and more frequently as we get closer and closer to November. I just wanted to know what she was going to say about it. So that's all. I mean, everyone is figuring this out for themselves. So I thought it was an interesting question to ask the group.
I think I was being a little too hypothetical. I was not at all insinuating taking money out of the market. I wouldn't recommend that at all, but that's just my personal opinion on that. I was just curious, or to you, Kara or Sarah, if like as Kara already mentioned, high yield savings accounts rates are very low right now, and like for me personally, I'm not interested in jumping at banks just to get like 0.5% or 1%. So this is more like, okay, if you've maxed out everything, you know, your monthly retirement account investment, your emergency fund and all that, what about the strategy of putting where you could be, you know, putting extra on your emergency account, or if just because on your savings, your cash, what about instead putting some of the extra money in your brokerage account, you know, where you can jump in if the market drops, because it's dropped a few times significantly this year. It wasn't just March, and it's not the same as last year. That's
Yes.
that's all it was.
Yeah. I mean, I'll never argue against buying the dips for a long-term investor. That's an awesome strategy. Like,
yeah, that's what I was asking about.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Buy the dips. You have the risk tolerance and the cash, buy the dips. Love it. Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah.
Related to that, someone else was asking about asset allocation. I was reading another way to do diversification is there are tax implications of making major shifts in your asset allocation, but another way to do it is to add, diversify when you buy new stuff. So like you can reach new target percentages ahead of time. So if you want to diversify, something falls low, there's indexes for different sectors, right?
Yeah.
So you could go and hop in on something you're missing.
Yeah. So, I mean, and there is this concept, again, going back to the low interest rate, that this environment we were in before that we haven't been for a while, but now we're back in. And so the acronym that they use in investing is TINA. There is no alternative. And that is, we're back in that environment where if you jump out of something risky and put your money in something safe, and there are questions about this in the chat, and Kara's already alluded to this, like just round it down to zero. Safe stuff, just round it to zero, maybe to 1, right? How long can you stay there at 0% or 1%? If you have a ton of money, maybe you can stay there for a long time, right? But most people aren't going to be able to stay there for very long. So if we think about the long-term low interest rate environment, which Jerome Powell has said is going to happen, you would expect that if people jump out, that that's only temporary, because you'll get forced out of a 1% money market fund eventually because you need more growth. You're not going to make it to your goals on 1%. So there's all of these, and this is where taking these long-term decisions and bringing them into the short term is very dangerous, because now already we've given ourselves this really complicated decision tree about jumping in and jumping out. And so going back to the planning and the resiliency and the flexibility with your plan and knowing where you're going and what it takes to get there, accepting things about the markets, and kind of being like water, with the markets, is going to help you a lot, so that not every jumping in, jumping out decision is the highest stakes thing that you're ever going to do. It's lowering the stakes, just letting it do what it does, because you can't control it. But that's, again, I find that to be easier for people, but it's hard to get to that place behaviorally, and I get that too.
Yeah, just to echo what Sarah said, if you can, buying the dips is the move, baby. That's absolutely the move. I think it's difficult for a lot of people to get to that point, both in terms of to have the cash to actually jump in at a moment's notice, but also with a confidence around that, with just I believe enough in this. But that will come from both consistently investing over time and just getting familiar with the language and the literal screen of investing, of how you're doing it, and can definitely pay off. So yeah, if I misunderstood your question, if you want to have money just ready to go, keeping it in your brokerage money market account, or in your brokerage account period, can be great. So I just, on the topic of investing, someone else says, any recommendations for safe investing a large sum of cash other than sitting in a sweep account, other than money market, CD, bonds, or traditional fixed income instruments? Anything out there at all? This is in an IRA, and I'd like it working for me for the long run. So an IRA is working for you for a long run. So I'm a little confused about this question. So it's already invested in the IRA, it sounds like. And so also money market, CDs, bonds, traditional fixed income instruments, there's a lot of options. They're all different. They all got a lot going on. And so I guess I would ask yourself why none of those are appealing to you, and why you want to take money out of the IRA, or if you could just be more comfortable shifting it from your stocks to your bond in your IRA. Also, how old are you? I just feel like I keep harping on the age thing, but it's so important. If you're young investor, you could be losing years of growth by making this shift to a more conservative portfolio right now. And I just as a woman, that can be a really devastating decision financially. And then above that, we also had a question about student loans. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I currently have federal student loans, paying 0 interest rate. I've been wondering if banks are offering lower rates than usual at a time to compete with this. I've decided to consolidate to a private loan. I'm just trying to figure out when would be the best time. I don't know. I mean, I don't know all the bank interest rates off the top of my head. You'll have to look at the banks that you're considering consolidating with and seeing what they have. And you're interviewing these banks the same way that you've been interviewed. So you can shop around and see what a couple of different banks or consolidation services are offering, and then just see if that makes sense for you and your numbers. In terms of how to time this, I would say sooner rather than later. Obviously, the more you can save on interest, the better. But that would, depend on a couple other things, like your income, your cash savings. Do you want to do this before the end of the year? Are you okay doing this in January? But I would say sooner probably rather than later on And then Jill asks, what about putting money into the stock market right now? What about it? I mean, I don't know. I'm doing it. Like, I'm not sure what this question means in terms of like researching the market and like feeling confident in making that decision. If it's a smart or dumb decision, should you not be doing it? Tell me more about your concerns.
Yeah, well, just in the fact that it is a volatile time, and you were saying earlier how you do expect that there will be even more volatility around the election. Is it better to just kind of hang out, like you say, buy the dips if they happen between now and then? But is it better if you have some money to put in to kind of wait until we see what happens with the election? You know, or is it just always a good rule of thumb to just jump in and get started?
Yeah. So I'm of two minds of this. Like, I always tell people, just get started. But if you're already investing and now you're like, oh, I'm just like trying to be more strategic around it, then yeah, you can wait for a dip. Like, a dip is coming. And a dip is always coming in the same way that a hike is always coming, right? Like, so I think it depends on the work you're willing to do. If you're willing to watch the market every day, if you're willing to stay on top of the news and just really understand what you're trying to buy, and then you're just waiting for literally the opening, you can wait to buy the dip. If you're like, I genuinely do not care, you're kind of doing what we call dollar cost averaging, which is you're saying, I know I'm going to buy in at some lows, and eventually it's just kind of average out. And dollar cost averaging is a time tested strategy, so there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I mean, I think if like in early October you want to start saving some cash to just see what happens November 2nd, so you can buy in on November 3rd, you know, that is also a totally valid thing to do. You just need to be doing the work of making sure you understand what you're buying and when you're going to be ready to buy it.
Thank you.
Sorry, I muted myself. Kathy asks, what are the tax implications of shifting funds from a mutual fund to, say, a money market fund? Off the top of my head, I don't know. I would consult an accountant. Okay, and then someone says, sorry, it keeps bouncing me around. It's very annoying. Okay, investing-wise, if I want to buy into the S&P, let me scroll back up there. Sorry, if I want to buy into the S&P, how can I evaluate those stocks funds in the S&P? Is there a website that I can go to and look at the choices in the S&P? Okay, and then I'm seeing there's some discussion around this. So a couple of things here. So I can't read all of the comments because it keeps bouncing around the chat. Every time someone says something, I lose what I'm trying to read because it pushes me down to the most recent comment. But yes, there are a bajillion websites out there that will tell you all sorts of things about the performance of funds. So there's one called Morningstar, there's Market Watch. I think someone is talking about something called Sasa. Oh no, okay, so that's a bank. Okay. And so you can also, if you have an iPhone, like they have a stocks app, and I'm not super familiar with it. I'm an Android girl, but you can watch the performance very easily. And so then that's a good starting place, right? Just to understand, like, what is this doing? Now, in general, like buying funds, I want to go back to your question. If I want to buy into the S&P, how can I evaluate the stocks and funds? So when you go to a brokerage's website and you're like, I want to buy this specific fund, they'll have a whole page about that, and it'll say like, here's its current performance, here's its past performance, here's its current price, and they have like a little data sheet on you. So you just need to know the fund name, and then you can look that up on the brokerage website, and it will tell you like, here's a screenshot of where it's at. And so that's super duper helpful. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about this Kasasa thing. What is that?
I can come out. I'm off mute if it's okay if I talk about it a little bit. So disclaimer, I do work for Kasasa, but it's not a bonus or kickback situation at all. I literally run communications and social media, etc. If you go to depositaccounts.com, you can look up rates at various credit unions and banks, and then you can set filters to look for those that offer Kasasa. Kasasa is not a bank, but we empower only community banks and credit unions. We do not work with any large regionals. We do not work with mega banks. We don't work with online only or non-banks like Google, whatever that BS is. Sorry, a little verklempt. Kasasa accounts offer typically, like one of my account gets like, I don't know, 3.75%. It's a checking account. And that is at a local bank, community bank. I have one at a federal credit union that's also local. That gets like, I don't know, 3.25%. And the way we can offer, Kasasa can offer to that financial institution to get those high rates is that consumers do the behaviors that save those institutions money. Like if you take set up a direct deposit or any sort of automatic bill pay. If you swipe your debit card, a number of times a month, and take an e-statement, because I know that everybody in this group is very intelligent. I will also let you know there are caps to how much on those accounts for which you can get the high rates. So, for example, one of my accounts has a $25,000 cap, and above that it goes to 0.5% for each of them. The other one has a $50,000 cap, and you can attach a saver account that automatically puts your refunds. We also refund ATM fees nationwide. So if you're worried about, I would love to do a community bank or a credit union, but how on earth am I going to get my money when I'm road tripping to, the Grand Canyon in my Subaru, whatever that somebody had mentioned, their 2013 Subaru. So it just puts that ATM network at your fingertips. So I'm happy to answer more questions about Kasasa, but it's a good place to park some cash. And what I do on one of mine is use it as a savings account. I have to make 10 swipes. And so I do them the cheapest swipe I can do for that month until I hit my account. It's sort of gaming, but listen, it's all legal. 100% legal.
Kirsten, thank you so much. Should have looped you in. She sent me a private message about that before and was worried about telling us all about these awesome programs at the company that she works with. So thank you for sharing that. It's super helpful. And Kasasa it's always ranked one of the best companies to work for in Austin. So, so thank you for sharing.
Oh, great. And they're all FDIC insured. Listen, Kirsten, if you want to reach out to me about this, this is something that I would be interested in bringing to the Bravely audience, or I can reach out to you, but I'm very intrigued by this.
Kirsten also at the Kasasa headquarters for an Austin Women's Investing Group meeting. No, that's been kind of way back in the day. That was right after we first met. So yeah, definitely I would say, use her as a resource as your fellow Austin Women's Investing Group member. She's always here hanging out with us and participating. So thank you. We have time for like one more question, maybe. Somehow we went from needing to fill in an hour to now running out of time, which is kind of what always happens and is so awesome with this group. So if anyone has any other questions, then feel free to chime in. Kara put her email address there in the chat box too, if you want to reach out to her. So if anyone has like a last minute question, hit us up. Well, we've covered a whole. Oh, go ahead, Kara.
I was just going to say, I did see another question about tax implications, and that's just not something I'm qualified to speak on. So, sorry.
Awesome. Well, this has been so great. Kara, thank you so much for leading our group today. I feel like I love all of the discussions that popped up out of it. I know it's always good for us to reroute ourselves into our own intentions and goals about money. That will always make things easier. What am I trying to do here? That's the whole point of what we're doing, using money as a tool to help us live the life we want. So I feel like you refocused us in a way that we really needed this year of 2020, where we're all over the place and drinking out of fire hoses and freaking out. And so I feel like this was very calming and soothing, and also very engaging. So thank you so much for doing this and being with us. Hopefully some people who can join some of your meetings, which I've been to some of those meetings in the past. I can't recommend them highly enough. Just to be like this, surrounded by like-minded women, is always wonderful. So thank you, Kara.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great, and everyone was so engaged, which is not always the case. So good job, everyone. And you can find me on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all the places. Bravely Go for more money conversation. If you need a conversation in your feeds and all the things.